Hello, friend. Welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Patrick Dorinson story. This week, we have an episode that if any of you have been in business or gone to conferences or taken a class, you know that if you pay for a class, even if it's really expensive, and you walk away with one good truth that changes your life, it's worth every penny. Today, while I'm interviewing Patrick, not only are we hearing his story, not only are we hearing his experience, not only are we getting nuggets of wisdom just dropped on us, which are amazing. It's like finding gold bars while you're walking down the street. We're talking to him about the foundation, building our foundation, building back America's foundation. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, you're a human, you're an American. We have a responsibility to God and ourselves and our country. And we talk about all these amazing things. And not only does he say things that at times get me riled up, not only does he talk about things that touch all of us close to home, not only does he make good common sense for people who maybe don't agree with us every day, but it would open a conversation like, you know what? That might be true. Thank you, Patrick. But he makes a statement and a quote that just stopped me dead in my tracks. And if I was you and I was listening to the podcast, I would have paused the show. I would have meditated on it. I would have prayed about it. And I would have really searched my soul. But I had to do it while I was still talking to him and conducting the interview. So enjoy this episode with Patrick. Ridin Fences was a podcast, a radio show he had. And soon he's going to be coming back out with his own podcast, Ridin Fences. But you're going to hear about who the man is, what happened along his life to make him the man he is today, where he's headed in the future. But more importantly, how does this all apply to you? How can this help you grow? How can this glorify God? And how can this make the world a better place? So you're going to get all this and more right after the short sponsor commercial. And then we are one-on-one with our friend, Patrick.
I'm excited to announce my all-new mattress topper. In the times we're in, I wanted to bring you the best affordable mattress topper ever. So I took my two best technologies and combined them to make the ultimate mattress topper. And now you can get it for as low as $69.98. Queen size only $99.98. It all starts with my famous MyPillow foam that provides you that overall full body support. Second is the individual comfort supports that give you an amazing custom sleep experience. It's like it's made specifically for you. The queen size alone has over 14,000 comfort supports. This is the perfect mattress topper to improve any bed. New bed, old bed, your guest beds. Get them for every bedroom in your house. Go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get the all-new My Mattress Topper for as low as $69.98. Queen size only $99.98. Don't delay, order today.
Hey, Patrick, how are you today, brother?
I'm pretty good, David. Just having a great day out here in Utah.
That is fantastic. I know you and I were talking before the recording. It's uncharacteristically hot, but you're getting through, right?
It's so hot you can fry an egg right on the fender of your pickup truck. It's that bad, and you can probably do bacon at the same time.
Yeah. And for those listening, you might be from America, you might be from Indonesia, you might be from Greenland. We have listeners, thankfully, from all over the world. But what Patrick's talking about in the Las Vegas, Nevada, Utah area, it is so hot. You can literally crack an egg and fry it on the sidewalk. So when he says it's hot, it's not an exaggeration. It's hot.
Yeah.
So, Patrick,
Yep.
thank you for joining us today. I told our
Bet.
listeners just a little bit about you and your story and what they can expect from today's episode. But being the man himself, if you were to summarize, we're going to talk about a lot of your life and what you've learned and what we can learn from you so we can all grow and be better humans. But if you were to guarantee someone that if they listen through this episode, you guarantee them you will walk away with this knowledge and be able to apply it to your life, what is that piece of wisdom you're going to share today?
Well, what I'd like to share with people is with all the problems that we have in this world, we look at them through the lens of how we're going to solve them. And that's good. We want to make sure that we try and solve the world's problems and we create a better world in the process. But we always kind of start at a level that is, I would call the above ground level. If you look at a building has a foundation. And as you're looking at that building, you really can't see the foundation because it's supporting the whole structure. But it's there. And if you do not have a foundation, not only for building something physical like a building, if you don't have a foundation for your life, if you don't have a set of beliefs, John Wayne said one time, a man's got to have a creed, a code to live by. What are the things that you have in your life that you can then, as you're having to make your own decisions, what do you measure it against? How do you decide whether something's right or wrong? How do you decide, should I be doing this? How do you decide the way that you're going to approach an issue or a problem? And that's your foundation. Now, we always talk nowadays in America, particularly about, well, we got a generation of kids that's too lazy and they don't want to work and they don't want to do this and they're addicted to their phones and everything else. Yeah, but you're talking about them where they're already old enough to be doing those kinds of things. If you don't build that foundation very early in life, you're going to have problems all throughout your life. My mother used to say, she raised 5 kids, and she used to say, if you haven't set the ground rules with your kids by the time they're 18 months old, you're already in trouble. Even though they're not be having conversations with you, you've got to lay down the ground rules. So I hope people come away with the idea that to have that rocks underneath you, that foundation, that steel that builds you as a person, you can pretty much face anything, and you can make sure that you have a successful and happy life. You can also contribute to the society that you're a member of, because we can't have a bunch of people out there who just think that the 10 commandments, for example, or the 10 suggestions, they're commandments. They were handed down to Moses by the Lord, and they mean something. They don't mean that you can, well, I'll obey, 1, 2, and maybe 3, but I don't know about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. That's not the way it works. Again, they're not suggestions. Those are the foundation for a society and law. And in the same way, you as a person have to have a foundation of who you are. And those are your values, those are your ethics, your moral compass, so to speak. If you don't have a moral compass, I don't know how you can get through life.
Amen to that. And people are listening right now, Patrick, and they're intrigued. They want to learn more. You learn this through your life.
Right.
You've had 73 years. If, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching, I know you're not going to think Patrick is 73, but he is, right? You said you're 72. 72.
Yeah.
Sorry. He looks
Don't push
fantastic.
me too far.
Huh?
Don't push me too far out there.
My bad. I was just, the age went through my head because when you told me you're in your 70s, I was shocked. So I thought you were in your late 40s, early 50s. So Patrick's lived a lot of life. He's got a lot of great experience. But Patrick, for our listeners around the world, let's hear about your story, your life. What brought you from birth through today that made these lessons so important, and how you learned to establish or at least recognize and plant your feet firm on a great foundation?
Well, I think a lot of it begins with my parents. My parents met each other when they were young people in California. They had both left their respective states. My mother came from Colorado. Her parents had died. She had nobody in the world, really. And her father, as he was dying, sent her out to California. He said, that's the land of opportunity. This is during the Great Depression in the United States in the late 20s and early 30s. And my father, the same way. I mean, he grew up with dirt poor people in Nebraska, and he had a brother that had already migrated to California. And his brother said, come out to California, there's opportunity. And my dad graduated high school when he was 15 and a half. And even though he was living in Omaha with his parents, and the University of Nebraska was only in Lincoln, which for those of you who don't know, Nebraska is not that far. They couldn't afford to send him to the University of Nebraska and pay his board. Just that small distance. Yet in California, going to university was free if you were a resident. So his older brother brought him to California. My mother came to California, and she was basically what we'd call nowadays a nanny. She took care of some kids, and she saved up her money, and she went to nursing school. My mom and dad had one date, and my dad was an orderly in a hospital, and my mom was a nurse. Well, nurses didn't date orderlies, but my dad had a dream of being a doctor. They had one date, and that was it. My mother says she never heard from him, and she liked him. What had happened is my dad had been working in a tuberculosis ward, and he had contracted tuberculosis. And after their first date, he was feeling a little weak, and he went to the physician who took care of the orderlies in the hospital and said, "You're going, and you're going to have to go rest for a year at least." Well, it took time for him to communicate to my mom what had happened, and God bless her, one date and they fell in love. And for a year, over a year, they wrote letters back and forth. I have the letters here of that they wrote to each other. And that's how they fell in love. Two poor kids. When they got married, they had $100 between them. My mom baked the cake. And after the wedding, they went back to work because they had shifts to do. And I guess the hard way they grew up, my dad did become a doctor and very successful. And my mom raised 5 kids, and she raised us the way that she had learned. And that was to be tough, to be strong, to love you, but also to teach you that there's boundaries that you have to respect. Like I was saying earlier, she built our foundation. And, it was so funny one time, I remember she had, when you got 5 kids, especially, they were poor. My mom used to say, we might not go on fancy vacations, even though my dad was successful, because they were saving money to put us through college. And they didn't waste money. And I remember one time I was at the grocery store with my mother, and I said to her, I said, "Can I have a candy bar?" Pointing to the candy rack. And she said, "Patrick, that's not proper way to speak. You should say, 'May I have a candy bar?'" And so I said, "May I have a candy bar?" And she said, "No." And that's the way she kind of run things. That's the way she grew up. She grew up on a ranch. As I said, her folks had died when she was very young. She went to live with an older sister on their ranch. She learned how to ride from a Cheyenne Indian. She learned how to work cows. She learned sheep. She learned everything. And it was all from, the old cowboy way. And as I went through my life, I went to college, and I did things also. I wouldn't say bummed around, but I kind of floated from job to job, and I really hadn't found what my place was in the world. And when I finally did, it happened to be in media and communications and politics. So, it was that cowboy way, though, never left me, what she had instilled in all of us. And I guess I followed it more than most. I mean, she named me after her dad. I was the last out of 4 boys, and then I have a younger sister. So, I hung on every word when she would tell me cowboy stories. And, I had a level of success in my life. But then when she was towards the end, I used to go sit with her. And she was suffering from some dementia at that time. And you'd really just kind of sit with her and listen to whatever she said. But every now and then, she would look at me, and with a laser focus, her eyes on mine. She had these steel gray eyes. They still scare the heck out of me. But they were loving eyes. And she would look at me and tell me things to do. she'd say, now, Patrick, we got to go out and tell your Uncle Brian that we've got to move the cows from the winter pasture up to the summer pasture. And she would just be focused. And then she'd drift away from that one moment. Well, you know, when she passed away, it was pretty tough. I probably should have spent more time with her, but you know, your life gets away from you and you forget that you really shouldn't put things off. There's a song by Cody Johnson, a country western singer. It says, "Till you can't." And in essence, it talks about don't put it off. Don't put off go seeing your mom. Don't put off that project you were going to do with your dad or even your brother or sibling. So anyway, when she passed away, I was trying to figure out because I was at a crossroads in my life, what I was going to do. And my wife at the time, I've had a couple of them. My wife at the time found this little thing in the paper. They used to call them fillers when we had newspapers in America. And they would, if they had space somewhere, they'd kind of, well, we better put something in there. So they had put in the Code of the West. And it was 10 things that you should do in your life. That you should, again, develop your code, your creed. Now, I knew I had a code inside me because my mother put it there and my father put it there. And sometimes she put it there by giving me the warmth of her hand on my backside, because that's how you have to do with kids, right?
Yeah.
Well, so I looked at this thing, and my ex-wife, she cut it out and she put it on the refrigerator with a magnet. And I kept looking at it. And it said it was written by this fella, James Owen, and it was from a book, Cowboy Ethics. So I ordered the book. And I must say, that book changed my life. It opened me up to something and showed me the path that I was supposed to follow. Now, subsequently, James and I became good friends because I started writing for Fox News, and I'll get into that in a second. But James and I became buddies. And in the book, he talks about things that you have to do. One of them is, you know, live each day with courage. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, you go out and lick your weight in wildcats every day. It means that you got to get up every day to face whatever is out there and whatever is your challenge. Talks about ride for the brand. And I have the book right here. It talks about ride for the brand, meaning if you hire on with somebody, you're working for them. You do the best job you can. Another one is some things aren't for sale. You know, you're going to get tempted a lot in your life by people that say, oh, you know, take the easy way out and I'll pay you for it. Nope, that ain't the way. So as I read this, I also made the decision at, what was it, 55 or so, I said, I'm going to learn how to ride a horse. I'm going to really do what my mother had always encouraged me to do, and I never really did, and had always regretted that I hadn't. So at 55 years old, I started taking riding lessons. And after the third lesson, I got bucked off and fractured my pelvis.
Ooh.
And that hurt. I couldn't get up. Now, they took me to the hospital, and fortunately, my dad was still alive at the time. My dad's a doctor, and he actually does some work in the rehab and orthopedic field. And he said, you're lucky because the bones didn't separate, so I didn't have to have surgery. But I lived in a recliner chair because I couldn't get up into a bed for 12 weeks. And I had a lot of time to think. So I thought to myself, what would my mother do? You know, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, well, I tried and it didn't work? And I looked up to the heavens and I knew that wasn't going to be the answer that she would have given me. So I found another person to be a teacher. And this time I found a good teacher. Her name was Debbie. She was a Montana cowgirl living in California at the time. And after a couple lessons, she goes, "Well, you got some natural skills here." And I had told her the story about my mom. She goes, "But I got to ask you something. At 55 years old, get bucked off, and you must have got bucked off pretty hard to have fractured your pelvis. Why did you get back on? You didn't have to." And I remember saying to Debbie, I said, "Well, Debbie, let me tell you something. Someday, I hope to see my mother in heaven. Now, if I didn't get back on, I know what would happen. As soon as I stepped through the pearly gates and got my pass from St. Peter, she would have probably seen me coming from about 100 yards away and probably would have said, 'So you got bucked off and you didn't get back on. Are you sure you're my son?'" I said, "Now I could listen to that for a day or two, but not for eternity." So I got back on and I learned how to ride. And again, long about this time, I'm writing for Fox News, and I was writing stories about ethics. I was kind of taking up what Jim had said in his book. And I got a call, a friend of a friend from a rancher. And by this time, I had gotten rid of all my suits, ties, everything. I wore nothing but jeans, cowboy shirts, a cowboy hat, boots, and had spurs and the whole deal. So I got a call from a friend of mine in the PR business, and she says, "Hey, look, I'm working on a project and I need you." So she told me about it, and it was about a bunch of ranchers who were being pushed around by a bunch of city environmentalists, and they needed somebody to write for them, defend them, if you will, because they were up against a big machine. So I wrote a piece for Fox News called "Range War in the West," and it was all about their issues. And from that, I got invited to speak at a conference in Denver. And some of the ranchers there, one of a woman I got to know very well, Jen Ellis, she said to me, "Why don't you come on up and gather cows with us this fall?" Well, for those who don't know, when you're gathering cows in certain parts of the West, you have your own private ground, they say, and then you lease land from the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, to run your cows on for grazing, because you really don't have enough private ground to make a living at it. So you augment your grazing by renting from the government some land. In places like Texas and parts of there in Southwest Arizona, even Arizona, you can do BLM. You go to Texas, you're running cows on your own dirt. You own it all, and there is no public lands to speak of out there. It's mostly in the Intermountain West. So anyways, I went out there and I gathered cows for the first time. And for the next 3 seasons, every year I went and gathered with them. And I got better with my riding skills and got a couple of horses. But I always kept, writing about the same thing, about ethics, values, morals. And it all kind of came back to that. My editor in New York said, "We got to give you a nickname, a moniker." So she called me the Cowboy Libertarian, because she goes, "Politically, you're kind of, you're on both sides." And I said, "No, I'm on one side. I just kind of think that, we all should learn to get along a little bit. And, as I like to say, as long as what you're doing is not illegal, it's not against God's law, and it doesn't scare the horses, you go right ahead. But remember, you're responsible for everything that you do. And with responsibility come consequences if you make the wrong choice." So I kept writing. I got a radio show going called the Cowboy Libertarian. I had it for 8 years, and it was a lot of fun doing it. I had a pretty good following. I had the #1 weekend radio show in the Sacramento area, and I reached all the way to the Oregon border. My favorite part was, it was a talk show. My favorite part was when I'd get a call from truckers who were listening to me coming through I-5, which is the main artery going from all the way from Canada all the way down to Los Angeles. And the first question I always ask him, "So what are you hauling?" And we would get in a conversation about that, because, I grew up in suburbs, was born in a city, but I always had an affinity for and I don't mean this as an insult to them, is the regular folks in America, the folks that get up every day and just do the work. Where I was living recently in Idaho, every morning I stopped by a feed store on my way down to check on my horse or ride or work some cows. And you go to a feed store or a trucking stop early in the morning, and you see the guys, if it's summer, they're filling up their ice chest with extra water and extra ice. They're going to be working all day in this kind of weather, this 105-degree weather. That single mom who's working at that truck stop, trying to put food on the table. And even if she's not a single mom, if she's a mom and her husband, he's out working and she's working at the truck stop, and they're all putting two and two together. They're the forgotten Americans. They're the people that nobody pays attention to. And that's been going on for a very long time in this country. Now, just to get a little political right now, since we're in an election year, Donald Trump didn't start what's going on right now in America. The movement, as he talks about, the Make America Great. That's been going on for a long time. And again, this is not an insult, but as I like to say, the bumpkins in this country who've been getting shoved around for so long, 60 years ago this summer, a guy named Barry Goldwater ran for president of the United States on the Republican side. The establishment, and there's always been an establishment in the Republican Party, couldn't stand him. He was from Arizona. He was outspoken. He said controversial things. And they said, we are never going to win an election with him. Yet the people, and the people who were delegates to that convention in 1964 in San Francisco, I was 12 years old. I was a big Goldwater fan. And the people who were out there to support him, they made him the nominee. And the elitists who hated him sat on their hands and didn't lift a finger to help him. He got slaughtered. Now, he might have lost anyways because it was the year after John F. Kennedy had been killed and Lyndon Johnson was president. And, it was pretty hard to beat a guy who's an incumbent and who had all of the levers of power at his disposal. But Goldwater fought right to the bitter end. And there have been other Goldwater. People forget that Ronald Reagan, the establishment, Ronald Reagan came from poor beginnings. He wasn't a rich kid, and the establishment didn't like him. Oh, you can't vote for him. He's a cowboy. He's reckless. He's going to blow up the world. And we've had other instances. We had the Tea Party in this country, and the Tea Party came along in 2010 and says, all these taxes, when we had the big financial crisis in 2008, you paid off the bankers. Well, whose backs did you pay them off on? Ours. So, they've been getting screwed for years, the regular people in this country. Yeah, but, if all the elitists would have to do is listen to country music, old country music, not this kind of junk they got today, and listen to what the guys talked about. There's a song called About 40 Hours in a Working Week by the band Alabama. And it talks about praising the working man in this country, the person on the factory floor, the person driving a truck, the police officers, right? There was another song by a country singer, John Rich, where he talks about shutting Detroit down, about this very idea that, the bankers and stuff screwed up the country and kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, hey, we're sorry, but you taxpayers are going to have to pay us off. Oh, who lost their pension? That auto worker that had retired. So it's been there beneath the surface. These are the people that year after year have been kicked around. And in 2016, once again, the elitists and the blue noses of this country couldn't stand Donald Trump. God, he was boorish. He was reckless, all the words they wanted to use about him. But those people believed in him because he was talking to them. not at them. And I think he learned a great lesson in that first 4 years, that they were going to come get him come hell or high water, and they did. And in 2020, and I'm not going to relitigate what happened, but let's face it, it wasn't exactly on the up and up. But I think he learned a lesson, and he didn't forget. This is the thing. He could have walked away from the whole thing. And everybody goes, well, he just wants revenge. No, he doesn't. They still don't understand him. All he wants is for these people to get a fair shake. And he knows that if the establishment takes over again, that the little guy is just going to, once again, take a beating for the sake of propping up a system that really needs a lot of reform. But getting back to me and what happened to me, those are the people that I love to talk with and talk about. They are, when you go into a store, it can be impersonal. You just buy your stuff. You don't say hello. Not me. I talk to them all. The feed store I used to go to and lived in Idaho, I got free coffee because I brought my own big old Yeti cup. And you talk to the guys going to work. Hey, what are you doing today? Oh, God, we got to lay pipe today. This weather? Oh, yeah, but it's got to get done. It's got to get done. You can't shirk it. You can't work from home. These folks can't work from home. They're out building houses. They're out digging ditches. They're going to the factory floor. They're going to the warehouse to make sure stuff gets delivered. It's that waitress who's on her feet for 12 hours, serving breakfast, then lunch. And by the time she gets home, she's exhausted. And she still has to do her homework, her housework. Those are the people that are the backbone of America. And those are the people whose stories I like to tell. So in my life, I've always tried to respect that. And maybe it's because my mom and dad didn't come from money, that everything they had in life, they earned. And the sacrifices they made for my brothers and my sister and I. Big sacrifices. But they wouldn't have it any other way. So I like to think that I got that foundation that I mentioned in the beginning. I had people who understood that was what I needed, and that's what was required of me and of them. And when you're going through life and you're faced with issues, I don't know how young people do it. I don't even know how older people who didn't have that foundation. We kind of tossed religion in the dumpster a long time ago for a lot of the country. Yeah, there's people that go to church. There's people that believe in God. There's people that pray. But for a lot of folks, that's not the way. Sundays are no longer a sacred day. Sunday's just another day for the weekend. And if you don't give kids that basic foundation, are you surprised that there's crime in the streets? Are you surprised that kids backtalk their parents? Because I'll tell you, if I'd have said some of the things that I hear in public where kids are backmouthing their parents, my mother would have knocked me in the next week if I'd have done that. Now, people can say, oh, that's child abuse. The hell it is. Here's the thing, a little side note. When people tell you that spanking and corporal punishment, which is anytime they make a long couple of words, that means they don't know how to explain it. Spank is the word. My mom used to say, if you do the discipline early, you won't have to do it often because the lesson will be learned. The problem is you got a whole generation of kids who never been spanked before. And every time they wanted something, they got it. They didn't have a mother like me who told them when they asked for a candy bar in the store, no. They get prizes for showing up. Oh, you got a gold star. Let's go take you out for pizza. What? My mother would have said, you got a gold star. You better get one next week. Again, that's part of the whole picture. Having a creed, a code, having something to measure your life against. Because, you know, when you do it that way, when you look at life that way, you realize that you can face anything. You have armor. Now, those of us that believe we also have the armor of the Lord. But imagine that extra suit of armor that really comes from the Lord, of strength, of your creed. You know, if I'm going to read a couple, these are mine. These are, and if it's okay with you, David, I'm going to read these because
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll even send us a copy and we'll post them with your
I'll get it.
page.
These are, you know, I got the Cowboy Ethics book. He also wrote another book called Cowboy Values, and you can buy those books. And we're all the same in a certain way. And before I read mine, when I was growing up on TV, there used to be cowboy shows every Saturday. And we also used to go to the theater and there were cowboy shows. When I was a very little guy, my mother would give my oldest brother money to take me, my brother Steve, my brother Rob, and myself to the movies. And before the feature started, they had a serial, you know, and they'd show you a clip. And at the end of the clip, you're waiting for the end. Come back next week for the next installment. Well, there was Hopalong Cassidy. There was Gene Autry, was a TV cowboy. Roy Rogers, the Lone Ranger. And each one of them had a creed or a code. You could get it on the back of a cereal box. Before we had iPhones, we used to read the back of the cereal box. And it would say, it was basically the 10 commandments of being a good cowboy. Take care of animals, protect the weak. And they each had one. And again, that's when media in this country reinforced the message that parents were trying to give their kids, not contradicting or not giving them a message that the parents didn't want them to have. You got all this problems with this and everything else. We didn't have to worry about that because we had a media that supported the Western way of life. And by that, I mean Western civilization, the Judeo-Christian way of life, the 10 commandments, you know, brush your teeth, wash your hands, and pray. All those things to part of your core, part of who you are. So, you know, I'm always like to talk about this thing. So I wrote mine down, and this is just kind of the way I see it in some respects. The first one of mine is faith. And I write, believing in something even when the going gets tough, and believing in the man upstairs to get you through it when it does. Faith. Faith means believing in something when everything else tells you not to. You have to have faith. That's got to be, in order for all the others to work, you've got to have faith in yourself, in your countrymen, and in the Lord. Integrity. Your word is your bond, and your handshake seals the deal. It's all you have, and without it, you have nothing. Character. I wrote about this one time. I'll tell you a story in a second. Character, how you act when no one is looking. If you do something wrong, even when no one saw you do it, it's still wrong. And there'll always be two witnesses, you and God. Ethics, knowing the difference between right and wrong and letting that be your guide. Nothing fancy, it's that simple. Trust. Trust is like virginity. Once it is lost, it's impossible to get back. Guard it jealously and never betray a trust. Sacrifice. It means giving up the easy path to instant gratification and trading it for the hard road to delayed satisfaction. The reward in the end will be that much sweeter. Grit. The commitment to give every endeavor all you've got and never quit, and the resolve to get back in the saddle when you get bucked off. I know that very well. Common sense. Think things through, and if it doesn't make sense, it probably isn't true. Use your head for something more than a place to put your hat. My mother used to say that to me all the time. Use your head for something more than a hat rack. But again, those are some of my ideals, and you all got plenty, but the point is you have to develop that set. If you didn't get it when you were young, you better take the adult class. It doesn't mean that you don't have them. It means you never kind of put them all together. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about a teacher in Denver, Colorado, and I wrote about her, and I know her pretty well. She taught at a very, very high-class suburban high school called Cherry Creek near Denver. And one year she was given the task, rotated amongst teachers, to take care of the class of, I guess, the kids who had problems. Now, they could have had problems at home, and some of them did. They were misfits, but not in a negative way. They didn't have any core. They didn't have any foundation. Whether they didn't get it at home or whatever, they just didn't have it. The troubled kids, I'd call them. And she was given a book that she was going to have to use to teach these kids. And she thought to herself, she looked at this textbook. You're going to talk to kids who have had trouble in school, and you're going to give them a textbook, which is boring to beat all. Instead, what she did was, a friend of hers gave her a book, Cowboy Ethics. This is my friend James Owen. So she said she prayed about it, and she sat up one night and she said, I'm going to teach him that. And she had read it, and it's pretty easy to read, and there's a lot of beautiful pictures taken by one of the greatest Western photographers ever, David Steckline, who passed away a few years ago. David was a friend of mine. He took a couple of pictures of me. And so she got a hold of Jim, the author. And she goes, I want to use your book as a teaching tool. Jim was thrilled. Jim sent her books for all the kids. And he said, I want to work with you, and let's keep in touch. And they did. These kids were given the book the first day. They didn't know what to think. They'd probably been kicked around so much in their lives that they probably thought, yeah, okay, cowboys, whatever. Now, they come from Cherry Creek, and even though it's a suburb, there's lots of cowboys in the surrounding area. There's rodeos and everything else. And she developed a program to teach them using the book from scratch. And the kids took to it. Jim then had a young cowboy named Ty Murray come visit the kids and told the kids, I live by this. I'm a cowboy. And he's a working cowboy. He's also a rodeo champion, world champion. And the kids more and more got into it. And towards the end of the class, Jim had printed up a little card, or she had printed up, Ann Moore is her name. And it was on one side, it was the 10 commandments, if you will, of the Cowboy Code. And on the other side was 10 blanks. And their job was to write their own code. And they did. Now, all the kids, the swell kids, probably, would have scoffed at this kind of lesson and probably would have dismissed it and maybe laughed at it. These kids, they had nothing, so they were willing to grasp at anything. And it helped them so much that there was a video made about it when the kids graduated, because these were all kids ready to graduate. Jim gave them each a certificate that they'd completed this course in cowboy ethics. And when you hear the video, one little girl said, "I have nothing on my walls. But when I got this, I had something to put on my wall." Imagine that. She had nothing. And she earned it. She knew it. A couple of the kids afterwards, I think a couple of them joined the military. They not all were successful, but for the most part, they got a new lease on life. I have no idea where they are now. I haven't talked to Ann in quite a bit. But it helped them just enough to at least get something going when they had absolutely nothing. By the way, a couple of those kids were senior speakers at the high school graduation. Here are the kids from the misfit class. That means so much because it shows that if you don't have a code, get one. Find one. If you got kids, make sure that they learn one. Develop one on their own if they have to, but you're a parent. My dad used to say, "I'm your dad, I'm not your friend." There's a difference. And if I may, I'm just going to read you Jim's 10 principles because it might help you understand where the world comes from. And Jim wrote this book because at the time, Wall Street was a bunch of crooks. Well, they're a bunch of crooks anymore, but they were a bunch of crooks. And Jim was a stockbroker. He wasn't a cowboy, never ridden a horse in his life. But again, he grew up like I did with the code on TV and all the cowboys on TV. And he merged this all together because the original title, the title of the book now is What It Takes to Win at Life. But when he first wrote it, he said, what Wall Street can learn from the cowboy. But here's the code. 1, live each day with courage. Like I said, this doesn't mean you have to go out and fight somebody every day or lick your weight in wildcats. 2, take pride in your work, whatever that job is. If it's sweeping a floor, be the best floor sweeper you can. And that is a building block for your future. You don't show up for work and just kind of look at the clock. Be the best you can at that job. That's how you're going to step up the ladder of life. Always finish what you start. We got so many quitters in this country. Oh, it's too hard, it's too hot, it's too this. I don't want to do it. I just don't want to do it. You're talking about all these people nowadays after COVID, they're going to retire early. Really? You're going to find out a pretty empty life out there. Do what has to be done. Again, you can't look around and looking for somebody else to do something. You have to do it. If it's your responsibility, take care of it, whatever that is. Could be small things, could be little things. Because remember, if you do the little things right, you're going to get the big things right. Be tough but fair. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you're a boss, you tell somebody to do something, fine. but be fair. Don't favor somebody over another. When you make a promise, keep it. I don't know if how many of you have ever seen the movie Lonesome Dove, but towards the end, Robert Duvall's character, Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones play these two cowboys who they show them when they were Texas Rangers, all up to moving cows up to Montana. And Tommy Lee Jones promises his friend Gus, if he dies up there, that he'll take his body back to Texas. Well, in those days, that's a long way. Well, old Gus died, and Tommy Lee Jones' character had to bring him back. But he made a promise. He kept it. Of course, later in the movie, he says, I'll be careful what I promise next time. Ride for the brand. That means if you're working for somebody, you're working for them. You're not a private contractor. You're not an individual. You're part of a team. You work for the team. You ride for the brand. Talk less and say more. This is something that should be tattooed on every politician's forehead, so when they look in the mirror in the morning, they can see it. I've never seen a bunch of people talk so much and say so little. And it's the same on TV. Nobody knows how to get to the point. There's a lot of blather and BS and cattle crap for nothing. Remember that some things that aren't for sale. Well, I talked about earlier about, how, you don't sell yourself out for 30 pieces of silver. But it also means don't sell your soul to the devil. Know where to draw the line. If you're a kid and a bunch of the other kids decide they're going to go create some mischief, and you don't have any adult supervision, that means you as an individual have to know when to draw the line and say, no, I'm not going to participate. That's kind of tough, especially for kids, because there's peer pressure. Maybe it's to smoke. Maybe it's to, steal liquor from your parents. Maybe it's just breaking a street light. I don't know. Throwing a rock through a window. You hear about these kids dropping bricks, cinder blocks off of freeway overpasses. People get killed. You got to know when to draw the line. That's one of the hardest, especially for kids. Now, all this stuff, and I talk about it all the time, and I said in the beginning about how you gotta, if we're going to solve the problems of this country, what we're doing right now is we're looking at that building I mentioned earlier, sitting on the foundation, right? And we say, well, let's, one bunch of folks says, well, let's paint it a new color. That'll help. And then somebody else says, yeah, maybe we can put on an addition too, right? Oh, I don't know, maybe we should paint the window frames a different color than the other. That's all cosmetic. Usually there's a fella off to one side who says, that building's leaning. And everybody, the others go, oh, yeah, don't worry about that. No. Before we take in all of your ideas over here, we better look at the foundation. We better go down inside in the basement and look at the foundation, because this thing's going to fall over, collapse. And all the paint and all the shiny new windows and everything else won't mean a thing, because all you're doing is fixing the outside. You're not fixing the foundation. That is how America and the world is going to survive. It's going to repair what needs to repair, the hard work. You know, in California, they always are talking about earthquakes. A few years ago, in one of the wealthiest parts of Los Angeles, West Los Angeles, right near Beverly Hills, multi-million-dollar homes, they didn't have an earthquake, but a pipe burst, water pipe. And it flooded some very historic buildings at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. It flooded buildings all over. And the cities out there were, you know, what are we going to do and everything else? And well, first of all, you better stop the water. And what they found is that underneath the street, all these beautiful homes and buildings and everything else, a big university, were pipes that were over 100 years old. 100 years old. Those pipes run all throughout the city. And they run all throughout every other city in America. We're just lucky we haven't had more of these situations. But what that tells me is you've got a bigger problem than just worrying about the aesthetics, as I said earlier. Because it's what's underneath. It's the foundations of a working city, just like the foundations on the imaginary building I talked about. Only this is real. And one of the reasons, after they did all their hemming and hawing and the politicians bloviated and we've got to do something. If I hear one more person say we've got to do something without telling me what we have to do, I think I'm going to throw up. They talked about why these pipes hadn't been maintained all these years. And there's a wonderful term that government uses. It's called deferred maintenance. They deferred the work that had to be done of maintaining these pipes and spent the money on something else. This money was set aside for that. So the politicians basically stole it from the deferred maintenance fund and spent it somewhere else. Deferred maintenance, my rear. Irresponsible incompetence is what it was. And it's just like us as individuals. If we, you know, when you get your code and your creed, you got to keep maintaining it. You can't defer it. You can't say, well, I'm not going to do it this week or this month or this year. I'll get back on the straight and narrow later. No, won't work, can't happen. This deferred maintenance is a metaphor for what's wrong in America. We've deferred the maintenance of our society, of our people, of our infrastructure, of our code, individual and national. Kids don't say the Pledge of Allegiance in school anymore. They can't even get finished the Star Spangled Banner at a ball game before the drunks start yelling. Now, let me give you a little note of optimism. Nothing can continue forever, even negative things. And all the wokeness and all the bad behavior and crime and everything else, eventually people stand up and say, that's it. We've had it. We're going to fix it. I think we're at that moment. But while we're there, going way back to what I was talking about, let's remember, it's not just fixing them. It's fixing us. It's making sure that, once again, kids have a code. They start with the code. It's making sure that if you're an adult, find a code. They're all over the place. You can have something to measure against. I'm not saying everybody's going to be a Puritan and everybody's not going to have fun anymore. What the heck? We're all going to have fun. We're going to have at it. All you got to do is remember, if you have that basic code, you'll never go wrong. And your kids won't go wrong. Yeah, they'll stray a little bit, but it'll be a heck of a lot easier bringing them back if you started them off with the code of life. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah, I know, and it's a great and it's a needed story. When you were talking, Patrick, I kept thinking about so many different parallels and just how our society is today and how it was just a few short years ago, let alone 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, your mother and father, they got married, they built a relationship. They didn't
Yep.
just rush into it emotionally. She cooked her own cake. She didn't have 37 bridesmaids in her party and a $3.2 million wedding.
Mm-hmm.
She was done with the wedding because they made a vow to God and one another, and then they went back to work for their life. And the people understood balance and priorities and sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're talking about your principles and the book and the Cowboy Way, everything you said, I can think of scripture and verse from the Bible. So to me, the math is very simple. Like you talked about how we should work hard and do everything to the best of our ability. And that's all over the Bible. One verse is do all things as unto the Lord, not unto men, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And it talks about all the different concepts that are in your core foundation. They're all from the Bible.
Yeah.
So when America was built on the foundation of God, which our founding fathers wrote in, whether people can say whatever they want, they wrote in every document.
Right.
Republic, we are a republic, we're not a democracy. The word democracy was purposely left out because they knew it's a
Correct.
failed society and structure. But the question is whether someone listening has trusted Christ as their savior and believes in God, or whether someone doesn't. I think you and I both agree they need a moral foundation. They need that core foundation. They need that
Yep.
structure. So the big question is, to me, it's like, hey, if you don't know, because there's people who really, they have no clue. Just a few days ago, I got in a conflict, almost a physical altercation with a 20-year-old military young man.
Mm-hmm.
And he had such a warped, entitled, and snowflake mentality that everybody in the room was like, this kid's crazy. But to him and his girlfriend and their generation raised on social media, that was normal. And my mind and everybody's mind was blown. So we all know there's a huge issue, but what do you think the bridge is to tie these snowflakes? And not everybody who doesn't know is a snowflake, but you know what I mean. We have a gentle
Mm-hmm.
generation. You raise
Yeah.
your voice to somebody like, why are you yelling at me? I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, I was excited. The Bruins just won. I got excited. That's like passion. That's not anything to be
Mm.
afraid of. So we live in such a watered down, literally a man and a woman, a male and a female. These liberal Satanists are challenging those definitions. They're telling second graders about sex, homosexual sex, transgender operations, when I don't care if you're heterosexual or homosexual. A second grader shouldn't be thinking about that. They should be thinking about Legos and the fundamentals of school, reading, writing, and arithmetic. So, in your mind, with your life experience, where's the bridge to you? How do you see us recovering? Because there might be people listening now being like, listen, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but there's some things that are foreign to me. I grew up in the snowflake generation. I grew up weak. How do I fix it? What's your advice to them?
Well, my first piece of advice is Look in the mirror first. If you're already an adult, like I said earlier, you're going to have to do your own self-evaluation. You don't have, you're past the time when your parents can tell you what to do, or anybody else, because once again, we have a generations of people who, and this goes way back, even the baby boomers that I'm a part of. Oh, we're special. Well, no, you're not. One thing we did have was there was still a foundation of Judeo-Christian America at that point. And so even if you gave up going to church or whatever, or, worshiping God in your own way, you had it was there, it was inside you, because the teachers of school reinforced the messages of the parents. It wasn't if you came home from school with a note in those days, your mother said to you, "What did you do wrong?" For the teacher to send a note home with you. And the teachers were backed up. Nowadays, the kid comes home and says, "Oh, this mean teacher gave me a letter. Oh, quick, let's call our lawyer and sue the teacher."
Yep.
Right?
It's always
So
somebody else's fault. It's never theirs.
that's true. Everything is, the dog ate my homework excuses, we used to say. And that, and with the equivalent today is when somebody gets caught doing something stupid on social media, they say I was hacked. So that's the modern equivalent of the dog ate my homework. But for older people, especially young, maybe in your 20s and stuff, you're going to have to search your own soul. You're going to have to start doing something that wasn't done for you. You're going to have to look in the mirror and decide for yourself, are you going to continue down this libertine path, or are you going to course correct? Now, for kids, my message is always to parents: you're a parent, act like it. Saying no is not mean. They're going to thank you for it sometime later in life. If you think that telling the child you can have anything you want, just shut up, when they act up. When you're in a restaurant, for example, I notice this happens a lot. There's kids are unruly. It's a public place. This isn't your living room. And even if it's your living room, you shouldn't be acting up like that. I remember when we were kids, when we used to sit at the dinner table, early on at one point, I'll never forget, my mom had got us all leather belts and our names are etched in the back.
We had wooden spoons.
Yeah, well, that was, yeah. A mother, it looked like mothers used to have a medieval choice of weapons.
Yeah.
Coat hangers, wooden ones were really good. But you're right. Yeah, there was a discipline. But anyway, so we go sit down to dinner, and we'd get up, and you wanted something, you walked around and grabbed the bread, you walked around and grabbed the mashed potatoes. Finally, my dad said, "I've had it." So the boys, my sister sat near my mother, the boys had to surrender their belts. And my dad used to run it through around your chair and put the buckle in the back so you couldn't reach it. And he said, "This is how we're going to learn how to pass things. This is how we're going to learn etiquette." And by God, we did. And that was the rule. And I'll never forget one time my dad took us all to dinner at this very, once in a month was when we go to a fancy dinner. We put on our little ties, we put on our little suits, and my sister wear her nice dress. My parents are all dressed up, although my dad wore a tie every day. You know what I mean? And we sat there with our hands in our laps, had conversation, didn't yell, didn't shout, anything like that. And I remember one time a waiter came by and said to my dad, he says, "I must say, sir, that your children are very well behaved." And my dad said, "Yeah, and I left the other 5 at home." So, but again, it's like you have to take command. If the younger parents take command, they're going to really say to themselves, "My gosh, that felt good. I'm in charge. I said no. I said, you're going to, I'm not going out and mowing the lawn. You're old enough. You're going to go mow the lawn." Why? What do you get for it? You get the satisfaction of knowing that you mowed the lawn and did a good job. It's like, you got to give, those are some of the practical things: chores, responsibility, saying no. a little corporal punishment goes a long way, and especially when they're very young. Don't wait. Do it early, and like I said, if you do it early enough, you won't have to do it very often. So, I guess my message to people is, we all got to look in the mirror. We've all got to decide what our code is. You can write your own if you want, or you can adopt one. And we all have to understand that all these things are the underpinnings of not just American society, or it's of Western civilization. That's what's under greatest threat. I mean, look what's happening in Europe, in France. France has been overrun.
Yeah.
You know, a priest can't even give mass in a church without getting stabbed.
Yeah. They gave up their own country. If somebody's not familiar, just to give a background, France, there's a joke. You become so liberal, you open your mind so wide, your brain falls out. Well, France became so liberal that they literally let Muslims overrun their country, and they don't even have their own standards anymore. They're being run by a particular segment of their country that overtook it, and they just claimed it as their own.
If America wants to look at its future, look to France and Germany. Same thing. Frenchmen didn't want to work and Germans didn't want to work, so they brought in cheap labor. Yep. Look what happened. There are parts of Paris, the banlieues, I think they call them, where the French police won't even go. They're Muslim enclaves. They're afraid for their own safety. Policemen. But you mentioned something else about, the lessons in biblical lessons.
Yeah. And hey, can I, before you say that, let me pause on one thing. There's one race, the human race.
Right.
And I don't want to put words in Patrick's mouth. What Patrick and I are talking about is nationalism. When you are America, when you are France, when you are China, when you are Australia, you have a pride in your country. You have a pride in your nation. You have a foundation that country was built on. And I'm not saying all French people are bad or all people who follow the Muslim religion are bad. But what I'm saying is the French leadership became so unprogressive, but quote unquote progressive and weak. They let their country be overrun with radical extremists who now literally enslave them. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying all French are bad. I'm not saying all Muslims are bad. But what I'm saying is we need to be nationally strong. And like Patrick's saying, it starts at the core of us, our foundation. So I didn't want to cut you off, Patrick. Right. I just want to make sure we wrap that up.
Yeah, well, two things. And just to follow on what you just said, the great migration to the United States in the late 19th and early 20th century. We had the great Irish migration that came in the 1848 potato famine. But in the later parts of, the 1880s on up through the 20s and 30s, we had migrations from other parts of Europe, Eastern Europe, Jewish migrants from the old Russian Empire. You had Italians coming, from poverty in Italy, which was very poor. You had all the Swedes and Norwegians coming who moved to Minnesota, and you had these great things. And Theodore Roosevelt very rightly said, you want to come to America, you're going to become an American. First, it was harder to get here because you had to get in line. You couldn't just rush the border like today. But, you're going to learn English. You're going to learn American values. You're going to learn this. That's how they were assimilated into the United States and became some of the strongest advocates for America there is. Because it wasn't, you're going to be over here and you can press 1 for Spanish and 4 for Albanian. No, that's not going to be it. When kids went to school, you're going to sit in the school, and kids adapted. And the kids became the interlocutors and the people to help their parents who didn't couldn't learn English. It was just, they're trying to work and everything else. But look how quickly those generations coalesced and changed America. But they became Americans. Did you have St. Patrick's Day? Yes. Did you have Columbus Day? Yes. But the one thing you always see in the St. Patrick's Day parade are lots of American flags and the good old Irish flag. On Columbus Day, go to Columbus Circle in New York, and you'll see, or or the Italian section of Boston, what are you going to see? Italian flags, and you're going to see American flags,
Yeah.
because the pride in being an American. The problem is we allowed it to go too far in a little bit, in my opinion, by calling people, you're an Italian American, you're an Irish American, you're a Jewish American, you're a Mexican American. No, 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 no. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The hyphen is the most destructive symbol in the English language. Get rid of it. You're Americans. You're not African Americans. You're Americans. That's the way it should be. And this is something that we've forgotten, and we've allowed ourselves to become balkanized and tribalized. It's a wonder we have problems. Instead of saying, nope, it's Cinco de Mayo, but you're an American.
Yeah. And what's ironic is people don't even celebrate Cinco de Mayo in Mexico, and like they do in America.
Exactly. Well,
It's-
St. Patrick's Day years ago, there weren't parades in Ireland.
Yeah.
It was
no.
the holy day of obligation.
Yeah. No, my grandfather, when he came to America, he was so thankful he joined the military. He was so proud to be an American. He joined the American military. And I think in World War II, there was more Italians in the military than any other like country. Like there's just the Italians were so proud because they came from such poverty, right?
Right.
But
right.
we're all Americans. We're proud to be Americans. And we were raised, like, I'm so thankful to God I was raised outside of Boston, because you really did have that sense of nationalism
Yeah.
and protection and common sense. If I see 18 people coming in my backyard, I'm dialing 911. I'm pulling up my gun.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let them in, give them a $5,000 credit card, a cell phone, put them up in a hotel while veterans are sleeping on the ground. Our society, starting at the top at the White House, is insane. It's either insanity or really absolute corruption, where they're trying to take down America and destroy our foundation. And to me, that's treason, and they should be held to the constitutional standard. But what you're saying is the division, the hyphen, I feel the same way. There's one race, the human race, and there's different cultures, there's different nationalities, but there's only one race. That was a Darwinian statement that even pastors and pulpits and priests talk about race. It's all a lie. We're all humans. If you want to talk about different nations, different cultures, that's a reality. But there's no difference in someone from China, someone from, I love when people say I'm from African American. Really? Are you from Egypt? Are you from South Africa? What part of Africa are you from? Because I hate to tell you, not everybody in Africa is black, and not everybody from Africa is white, and black and white, we're all brown. You know what I mean? So it's like, people are like, well, you're a white guy saying that. No, or I'm a human saying that. If you can find anybody, people may like me or hate me, but I'm the same jerk to everybody. And I got friends from all cultures and all countries, and I really believe we're equal. And I do think, I will say, I grew up outside of Boston, so that was more socially taught and more accepted. One race, the human race, everybody's the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were somewhere else geographically, maybe there'd be more bias, but it's not your fault. It's not my fault, unless we're continuing the hate. So whether you are quote unquote white or quote unquote black, if you don't like somebody just because of the color of their skin, you're the bigot. You're the bigot today. You're the bigot right now, and you are the problem. So we need to stop it and just move forward together. And I kind of derailed a little bit, but going back to the foundation of America, and when people are listening and they're like, okay, like you talked about parenting, all this gentle parenting, and people say I'm a Christian and they gentle parent. Are you kidding me? You obviously aren't Christ-like, because you're not reading the Bible. It says, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Spoil the child, right?
Exactly. You're not beating. It says the blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil. And we're not saying we're beating the child, but we are beating them into submission. So like you said, you get them when they're little, they don't become a convict when they're older, right? I was at a birthday party like a month ago, little kid. Another mom's there with her kids, and the girl throws a fit because she wanted a cupcake.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the mom do? The mom's like, oh, she had a hard day. We were at the pool all day. She's hot and tired. I'm going to give her a cupcake. And she gives her a cupcake. She rewards her for throwing a tantrum. And then the little brat, half an hour later, wants another cupcake. So the mom and dad are like, oh no, no cupcakes. You've already had one. We need to go home. So what's the kid do? She throws a fit and gets another cupcake. And then before they go, she throws another fit. So they took one home. So all of these people, you may like me or hate me, but come on, people, use common sense. What Patrick's saying, you can call it the cowboy way, you can call it the American way, you can call it whatever you want way. But that any truth that works comes from the Bible. And God loves everybody. But when you're reading your Bible and you're not applying it, that's insanity. And when you see a kid throwing a fit and you reward him for it, what do you expect to happen down the road? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
Drugs.
Ex- Disobedience, more
Yep.
crime,
Yep.
white collar crime. We
Yep.
are in a society where look at our White House, Democrat and Republican. These people are criminals on every level, immoral. Like you ever see those things they name how many people in this is an organization, which organization is it? The NFL, the NHL, Congress. And it's like they have the most murders, the most adulterers, the most pedophiles, the most jail sentences served. And it's like, this is our Congress? Really? So what Patrick's saying is we need to get back to a better way of life. We need to get back to the moral compass of the Bible. But if you don't want to trust Christ and believe yet, hopefully you explore the Bible and see how it's all true. What Patrick's saying, that cowboy way and his books and his friends' books and the way they've lived their life, those give you a core. So it doesn't matter who's looking, it doesn't matter the circumstances, it doesn't matter the consequences. You're going to do right because it's right, and you can feel peace and respect at night, and you're not doping yourself up with drugs. You're not taking unnecessary antidepressants and all sorts of things
Right.
to medicate yourself through life. You're actually living and feeling.
Well, it's also, you mentioned, NFL, Congress. I always said to myself, there's both the Senate and the House have an ethics committee.
Yeah.
And members can go to the committee to ask if a certain behavior is permitted. And I said to myself, any organization that feels the need to have an ethics committee has no ethics.
Exactly.
They have to. So you're going to go to somebody, think about this. You're going to go to the ethics committee or have your staff go and say, the congressman's about to do this. Is it okay? The congressman doesn't know it's wrong. Well, he just wants to know if he can walk up to the line without stepping over it.
Yep.
Can I commit the crime up to the point where it's a crime? No. Once again, that's that, selective moral judgment that you're going to have.
Yeah.
And every time I hear about these guys, people ask their lawyer, well, the business, we'd like to do this thing, and we don't think it's really kosher, but we want to do it anyway. Can we do it? And the lawyer, instead of saying, what are you, crazy? Says, well, you can do it up to this point. After that, you could jeopardize the company. You should know it's wrong from the get-go. This isn't rocket science. And that's one of the things that I find most disturbing is this idea of what can I get away with?
Yep.
And it's like I said earlier about character. If in your mind you don't have the character to know, even though nobody's going to catch you, even though you might never be found out, it's wrong. It's wrong, and you're going to have to answer for it at some point. Now, you might think you don't. But quite frankly, I used to tell people on my radio show, I said, well, you're going to have to answer for it sooner or later. Do you want to take the chance that, people say they don't believe in God? Well, come Judgment Day, you're going to be one mighty sorry fella.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you said, what's the number one, if you took all politicians, the number one career path is attorney. And it's not so they can better administer law and godly judgment. It's so they can do exactly what you said. How far can we go and manipulate this law? How can we twist things? How can we pervert things? How can we make gray? Our tax code alone, the most robust and complex tax code in the world, on purpose. So it's confusion. Who's the author of confusion? Satan. Satan's the author of confusion. So I think one of the most disgusting, vile things that ever happened to America was not Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky having the affair. That's disgusting. But the fact that the bastard stood up there and he's like, well, what is? And he's
Yes.
just messing with people's heads
Right.
and twisting things around. Listen, you piece of crap. You're one of the most despicable politicians we've ever had in public office. And he did it and slapped Americans in the face who had morality. And it's because he was a piece of shit. Sorry, but oh well. Piece
Yeah.
of shit attorney who just bends and plays with the laws. And we need to understand that we need to live, like you said, with a black and a white, and don't even get close to the line. Stay as far away from that line as possible so you are above reproach and beyond that, even to fall into that kind of sin. But these people, they want to go into the sin. And like you said, if you have an ethics committee and you have to ask if something's ethical, you're just looking for an excuse to do bad things.
Do it.
You're a
Yeah, to
horrible
do it.
human.
Right. Well, and it's funny when Clinton and Monica had their affair in the Oval Office, it became and I wrote about this years ago, it became a kind of a joke, but really not a joke among young people, that oral sex was then considered pulling a Clinton. That's his gift to the youth of America.
Yeah. I remember I was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I know this is forever, but I remember the predominant thought was if I don't have vaginal sex, I'm still a virgin.
Yeah.
So there was
Right.
girls having anal sex, oral sex,
Yeah.
group
Right.
sex, but because they didn't put in their vagina, they were still a virgin. And I'm like, you don't get the concept. You just don't get it. That it's just sad. And Bill Clinton was one of the catalysts for Americans' demise, in my opinion, morally. And then even ethically, like people like, I work so hard. When they changed, I forget the year, but when they changed the law for what full time was considered in America,
Oh
I
yeah.
remember talking to my other business friends and being like, that's it. Any work ethic, any kind of production we had coming out of ourselves and employees is gone. Within 5 to 10 years, the bar has been dropped, not just lowered, it's been dropped on the ground. And now look what's happened to get people to work, to show up. You don't even need to do your job well anymore. You just need to
Right.
show
Right.
up. You can bitch, you can moan, you can complain, you can demand a raise, and these people are getting it.
Yeah.
They have no work ethic. And I really think there's some key moments in American history where we accepted it as the moral majority, like you were talking about earlier, that we just work for a living. We just get stuff done. We make the money so they can waste the taxes, right? So when you see this all go on, what do you think the solution is? How do you think we turn it around?
Well, we turn it around in a couple of ways. The first way is the people that are actually doing the work, and I think it's going to happen in November, they've got to show up with sufficient anger, but anger alone doesn't do it. Anger only gets you riled up. Once you get riled up, the boss always says, well, all right, you're riled up. Now what are you going to do about it? And this is where action comes in. It's where, President Trump, like I said, he learned a lot his first time. He learned how evil the people running the country are and how what they were willing to do to him to destroy him and at the same time destroy the country. But it's kind of things like, remember the 51 guys that signed that letter about the laptop? And this is just one isolated thing. What happened? All those guys are former spooks, former, CIA and FBI guys, right? They still have security clearance. That means anytime they want, they can call Langley, Virginia, the CIA headquarters, and get information because they're cleared. The first thing you do, number one, is you strip them of their clearance right away. Any ex-spook loses their clearance the day they walk out the door. That's one. Number two, anybody caught talking to them and giving them information will be tried for treason. because they no longer have security clearance and you're giving them information. You've got to start with reality and hit people. The same on taxes. You guys are spending our money. There has to be more of, and this is both parties, start demanding to know where the money's spent. The bureaucrats run things so well. I worked in Washington back in the 90s, and I got to tell you, that's when the appropriations process worked. It actually worked. You had 12 appropriations committees, subcommittees, and each one of them was divided into certain departments, right? What happened was the heads of those departments had to come before the appropriations committee, and they had to say why they needed this money. Now, granted, Congress spends like crazy, but at least you had to justify to somebody what you were going to spend it on. They didn't take it the next step. The next step was going to be, you have to eliminate, don't tell me how much you want. I'm going to tell you how much I'm going to give you based upon what I think you need. Congress does it the other way around. They allow the departments to come in and say, here's how much I need next year. No. We've looked at your budget. Here's how much I'm giving you. You figure out how you're going to spend it. Though you've got to go after the crooks that are running the system. And the crooks that are running the system, the electeds are just up here. They switch out. It's the guys, it's the deep state. And every time we talk about the deep state in America, we talk about either the guys who are the corrupt defense contractor types, or we talk about, the spooks and the spies. No. It's the whole thing. Every department is littered with people who are just treading water, drawing a paycheck, running the country. You've got to strip this thing down piece by piece. If you're redoing, if you're going to take an old car and refurbish it, you got to strip it out, get rid of the bad parts, and fix it. And that's what we've got to do in America. So that's kind of a start. On the other things about our ethics and moral background and stuff like that, it's going to take the regular guys. It's going to take the moms and pops, and it's going to take the working stiffs out there to teach America a lesson. Stop funding these universities. If you're a taxpayer in Massachusetts and there's state universities, demand that that things be done. You're a taxpayer. I don't care if you went to the school or not, right? It's gonna take a almost biblical cleansing of the society. That's what it's going to take. And it's going to take people who understand they're in it not just for a 4-year term or a 2-year cycle or whatever else. And the next thing, finally, to me, is take every consultant in Washington, fire them, and make them go to work at Walmart or Costco or something like that. Make them actually do something.
Yeah, and political lobbyists.
Yeah, exactly. And lobbyists, which are nothing more than, residents of the red light district of Washington.
Yeah.
We know what kind of work they're in. We're just arguing about the price.
Yeah. And if you don't know what we're talking about, I'll say it so Patrick doesn't have to. Lobbyists are like freaking immoral scumbag gorillas. They'll do whatever you tell them for the highest price, and they don't care who dies or who gets hurt or if it's good or bad for America.
Whose country they're working for?
Nothing. They'd sell their mother for a nickel if they needed an ice cream cone. Just scumbags. Most 99 out of 100. So if you're the one lobbyist out there that's good, hey, praise God, but go show us and do something right with your life.
They're the Judas Iscariot Club.
Yep.
They will sell us out, and they do it on a regular basis. And so, again, it's going to take somebody who understands and a group that understands this is going to be a long rebuilding process. But, when you're trying to fix the foundation, like we talked about, it's going to take people that are willing to get their fingernails dirty.
That's it. And I want to clear up one more point before we transition, Patrick, into where you are today and where you're heading. Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick, you can disagree or agree with me, but ladies and gentlemen, we don't need more laws to fix America. We have everything we need in the Constitution and the Constitution was written from the Bible. But even if you don't believe in God, our founding fathers were wise enough to outline everything in the US Constitution. We don't need more laws. We just need to enforce the ones we have. Would you agree or disagree with that, Patrick?
100,000%. We got everything we need. It's like saying, well, we need another tool. Nope, you don't need another tool. You were given the tools. So don't keep looking around for another tool, because then you're just postponing doing the job. You don't need specialty tools. You were given great tools by great thinkers and people who, even if they came down today, would look at the system and say, well, it survived, but boy, what did you guys do to it?
Yeah, it's pretty awful. I mean, where we've come in just my lifetime and your lifetime, it's disgusting. And a lot of people, I still think like 80% of Americans are solid, good, moral people,
Mm-hmm.
but they just work every day and mind their own business. And the 10% rats just absolutely ravaging what's going on here.
It's the
But
people, it's those people that have the time. The people that you're talking about, that 80%, they don't have the time. They're trying to
yep,
live and build and work.
yep. And the other people have the time to manipulate, steal, scam.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being here. Between your birth and today, is there anything we missed in your life or any final thoughts before we transition to where's Patrick today and where are you heading next? How could maybe we help you as a remarkable community get there?
Well, you get to a certain point in your life and you look back and you say, what could I have done differently? And what would I have done differently? Well, those aren't the questions you should be asking yourself. What you really should be saying to yourself, and I have to remind myself all the time, is don't look back. You're not going that way. Or as John Wayne said one time, looking back is a bad habit. You can't change where you've come from. Your life is, and I hate to use a trite phrase, but it is a journey. And there's ups and downs, and you should, a couple of failed marriages and a couple of breakups and things like that. But for the most part, I'm pleased with where I am. Like I said, you can't change where you come from, so learn from it and make everything a lesson. And also cherish those memories, because your life in the end is, you might not be there to hear the eulogy, but it's about the memories and the things that you've done and the accomplishments. And those can be big accomplishments or little accomplishments. But nonetheless, if you can look back in your life and be proud of what you've done, you've led a good life.
Amen. I love that quote. Don't look back. You're not going that way. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And my favorite quote that I used to use on my radio show was from Will Rogers, who said, don't let yesterday use up too much of today.
Nice. So
Get up
where's
early.
Patrick today and where are you headed next, my friend?
Well, right now I moved out here to Utah from Idaho. I'm working on some things. I still do Newsmax television on a weekly basis, and trying to work on developing my own podcast, so to spread this message and keep spreading this message to the people of America and indeed the world, because we're supposed to be a shining example, as Reagan said, that shining city on the hill. And there's only one way we're going to get there, and that's to get out the cleaning supplies and start cleaning up our shining city and make it shine.
Yeah, and that in itself is another biblical reference. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? All the common
right.
sense goes back to God in the Bible.
Yep.
People don't know it, but that's where it comes from.
Yep.
So awesome. Well, if somebody want to get a hold of you, Patrick, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Right now they can go to my website, ridinfences.com. It's RIDIN fences.com. And they can leave me a message. There's a section there where you can send me a message directly. You can also see me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. And those are the basic ways to reach me right now. My Ridin Fences is my way of honoring the people that built this country. And real quick, when the term riding fences is out on the ranch, or if you're out on the range, there's fencing, and you got to ride the fence on your horse and look for holes and fix it. And you can't just say, well, I'll come back and fix that later, because that means your cows might get out. That'll cause problems. And so you're constantly having to ride the fence. It's not glamorous work, but it's work that has to be done. And I think those are the basics of what America's all about. Everybody has to get out there and keep riding fences for the ranch, for the country, and for each other.
Amen. And again, I just kept thinking another biblical reference, examining ourselves in 1 Corinthians. Most people think that's communion passage, but that's an everyday passage. Examine ourselves. Where am I wrong? Where can I improve? How can I please God more and help one another? Love God, love thy neighbor, right?
Right.
All right, Patrick. Well, it's been amazing to spend this last couple hours with you. Ladies and gentlemen, like our slogan says, listen, do, repeat for life. Don't just listen to great content from Patrick, but do apply the stuff you heard that's good. Repeat it each day consistently so you can have a great life, not only in this world, but in eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This is our remarkable friend, Patrick Dorinson. Patrick, thank you for being here again, my brother.
You bet. Thanks, David.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, share this with your friends and family. Please like us on, all the good places that, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify, share it, shop our sponsors, just enjoy all the perks that come with being our remarkable community. But again, if you want to reach out to Patrick, check out ridinfences.com. Look at his books, look at the literature he puts out, his Newsmax articles, and let's just support each other and grow a better world for your sake and for God's glory. Again, I'm David Pasqualone. We'll see you in the next episode. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat for life. The Remarkable People Podcast.